Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Maqbool, with you at BTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at two important stories. The first, of course, is reference to the very important decision with regards to what is going on in Gaza that was earlier due today on emergency measures that have been asked by South Africa in the International Court of Justice. The ICJ, in its interim ruling, has announced that Israel must prevent genocidal acts in Gaza and facilitate aid to enter into the Gaza Strip as well. It stopped short of calling for a ceasefire, but did ask for about 6 provisional measures that need to be taken to end what is going on currently in Gaza. This is important, especially in terms of a lot of ways in which Israel had proceeded with for many decades with a culture of impunity. And this, of course, something that was entrenched in the statements coming in from Netanyahu as well as the proceedings were continuing, saying that this is unacceptable, that there is talk of genocide, and that there is nothing that the ICJ can do, especially with regards to its jurisdiction on the matter. That, of course, has also been ended by this particular ruling. However, of course, it remains to be seen what this will mean in terms of the people who are suffering in Gaza. We've already lost more than 26,000 lives, more than many of them women and children. And this is something that, of course, is important in terms of what actions now will be taken. Even though this decision is final and without appeal, the court does not have the power to enforce these measures, which means it remains to be seen whether or not Israel is in fact going to comply with these provisional measures. It does have to provide a report of compliance within a month, however, which might make the situation difficult for Israel in the future run if loopholes can be found within that by parties, including that of South Africa. At the same time, there will be increased pressure on Israel and its allied partners, including the US, with regards to how this is going to continue moving forward. We've also, of course, seen that there is increased pressure from the international community for calls of an end of ceasefire. Many are still interpreting the decision currently, even though it has not established that there's a genocide going on in Gaza, but they are saying that the fact that international aid must come in means an end of the hostilities that are going on. However, this, of course, is implied and is not clear as to what really is happening on ground. We have other examples in the world, most recently that of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, in which the ICJ did order to Russia to stop its invasion. However, that ruling was also ignored. So what sort of impact is going to exist for this decision, of course, remains to be seen. But we're going to try and understand what this ruling means and how it's going to impact the ongoing genocide in Gaza. Our second segment is going to be taking a look at what is going on in Pakistan. Of course, we've been talking about the kind of political atmosphere that exists within the country in light of the upcoming elections, which are due on February 8th. And so very less time is left for the elections, and campaigns are continuing across the country, perhaps with far less enthusiasm as was before. At the same time, of course, different political parties earlier, of course, have also called for level playing fields to the elections. And there was talk of being more inclusive and allowing everybody to contest elections unless there is any valid reason. In light of which, the Supreme Court has also allowed and granted permission to about 5 of PTI's candidates to contest the elections, including Mr. Pervez Elahi. And this is, of course, an important development for the party. What this means, especially in terms of its success in the elections or the impact that it's going to have in the elections, is something that we'll explore further. At the same time, the PPP has been calling for PTI independent candidates to come to the PPP side and not waste their votes, and claiming that that's the only way to stop the PMLN. And we saw that Senator Abro also withdrew in favor of Mr. Bilal Bhutto from his constituency as one of the examples that we have seen of this happening, and perhaps there might be more. So we're going to try and explore what this means in terms of the strategy that is being followed by the PPP and whether or not the PTI and PPP would be able to team up against the PMLN. That is going to be our focus in the second segment of the show today. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal. We've also been joined online for our first segment by Dr. Jamil Ahmed Khan, who's a former ambassador, and we'll be joined also by Ahmer Bilal Soofi, who's a legal expert. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being part of the discussion. And Ambassador Jamil, I'll start with you, of course, as to what is going on in Gaza and the very important interim ruling by the ICJ. How do you see, first of all, in the interim ruling with regards to provisional measures that have been ruled by the court that Israel must, of course, prevent genocidal acts in Gaza and also allow aid to come in to the Gaza Strip? Will this be something that you can see actually happening on ground in the aftermath of this ruling?
Well, happening on the ground and its implementation is a different aspect, and there are hardly any mechanism or hardly any tools available with the ICJ to implement their judgment. So that's one part, and I'm coming on that. But the second part is that it's a huge success of the peace-loving people of the world, and I think the world, the peace-loving people around the world, they should give a standing ovation to the party which had taken, that is, South Africa, taken this matter to ICJ. So that is definitely a huge success. But at the same time, in fact, there are two parties. From the international law point of view, it could be debated by some who are favoring Israel, and can be supported by those who are not favoring Israel, and that is Houthis. So Houthis stand and the South African stands. They are two different groups, and Yemen is a different country, obviously, but the kind of stand which they have taken on principle, and their demand are so fair, and their demand are basically to ensure the international peace. Because if the Gaza war continues the way it is, 112 days, and with about 26,000 people killed, with the atrocities which has been mentioned by ICJ, and all the evidence, 6 points which ICJ judges have announced today, and the measures they have recommended, if we bear in our mind, then those are supportive of those people of the world, and those peace-loving people of the world, and those countries who are interested in maintaining the international peace, which is enshrined in the chapter in various chapters of the United Nations Charter. So all these things, if we read it and we discuss it in reference to each other, I think we'll have a better understanding about it. So coming back about what it means to Gazan people, it means the same thing what it happened once General Assembly had passed a resolution with the overwhelming majority of 153 countries. Initially, there were two different resolutions of General Assembly in this context. Once the humanitarian pause was vetoed in the Security Council by certain countries. So afterward, the world has shown which side are they. The entire community of the world, 153 countries, with just about 10 obstinance, 10 opposition and few obstinance. So it's the ICJ judgment. It is going to be a moral pressure. But Israel, as PM Israel has said, they will continue with their aim and objective. And while the judgment was being announced, and afterward, the bombardment in Gaza had increased, and that's what the live reporting we are hearing from Gaza. So the conclusion which I can draw based on what reaction Israel had after the two resolutions of General Assembly, and obviously Security Council could not give any relief except one which was not accepted by Israel, and which was that resolution of Security Council, which is a binding, that is 2712, which was passed on November 15th, in which they had asked nothing, and that was basically unanimous decision of the Security Council, in which they had asked for the humanitarian aid, but even that was blocked. So I'm just trying to draw some arguments which is of the extreme nature. The very entity and the very institution of the world under the United Nations Charter, which means the international law, the Security Council, which is not really in favor of the ceasefire or the pause, but still they passed a resolution which was not compliant. Now, if we draw some parallel of the example which I have cited, examples of General Assembly and examples of the Security Council, and by the way, there are about more than 5 Security Council resolutions which prevent Israel, and which has binding binding obligation of Israel that they should go back to the boundaries of 1967 war, including Golan Heights and
Right.
the Gaza and some of the other territory. It didn't happen. So this also, the implementing, there's no implementing tool. At the best, the implementing tool
Okay.
is the United Nations Charter, Chapter 6 and Chapter 7, but that could be vetoed. So, although it's a moral ground, the world has gained, but I think the implementation of it is going to be a very, very difficult task. And
Right.
therefore, we should not really raise our hope because soon
Absolutely,
after the
and we'll
judgment I
talk
have
more
seen.
about the points that you've raised, Ambassador Saab. But let me also welcome in the debate Ahmer Bilal Soofi, who's a legal expert and he's joined us. Thank you very much for joining us in the debate. And I want your take on the ICJ's ruling today and whether or not there is enough reasons to celebrate at this point, given that there are a number of provisional measures Israel has been asked to do. But of course, at the same time, the court has stopped short of a ceasefire. I know that the core of the issue is still ongoing in terms of the hearing, but do you think that at least what has been ruled in terms of preventing genocidal acts does in fact establish the fact that there is a genocide going on? Is that different from actually saying that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza?
Well, from a general standpoint, obviously, we all were very clear from whatever the evidence was coming out in media and news reports that acts of genocide were being committed, which were in utter violation of Article 2 of the Genocide Convention, which creates an obligation on all the member states to make efforts to prevent genocide. And regrettably, no member state was coming forward to actively prevent Israel from committing these acts. So when South Africa took this matter to International Court of Justice, it was quite a unique development because a country which is in African continent, which is not close to Israel or Gaza Strip, has chose to go to an international court. And this is something which International Court of Justice also examined this. But they came to this conclusion that all those states which are parties to Genocide Convention have a collective responsibility. And if one of the states has brought up the matter to the notice of the ICJ, that's perfectly legitimate. And based on that, they also examined if there's a dispute existing between the parties in a legal and a technical sense, which is a very specific legal analysis in terms of whether South Africa and its correspondence with the United Nations, with the Israeli embassy, demonstrates its position on genocide and how Israeli government was reacting to that, and what was their position from the executive branch of the Israeli government, and how they were denying it. So therefore, they came to a conclusion: a dispute exists. The basis to bring the matter to the ICJ was clear. There was no reservation attached by the government of Israel or the government of South Africa. So in terms of Article 9, nothing was preventing ICJ to continue taking cognizance of the matter. And moreover, Israel itself had pleaded and it was given an opportunity to resist this case, which it did. But eventually it was overruled. And today we just noticed that not only they entertained the case, they also recognized that there is a dispute existing, and they also, prima facie, concluded that sufficient material legal evidence, correspondence of the United Nations, the correspondence by the Secretary General of the United Nations constitute sufficient material that genocide is being committed. And in that context, they also thought it is meeting the test of urgency that provisional measures should be issued, and that order was therefore passed today. So it is quite an unprecedented development in terms because ICJ normally does not issue provisional matters in every case. It's a seldom happening. It's a rare happening. Not only has ICJ issued interim measures or provisional measures in terms of Article 41 of its ICJ statute, it has also at the same time asked Israel to provide a report within 1 month on how it is implementing these interim measures. So that is quite a unique development. I do not recall cases in which ICJ, while passing provisional measures, has also asked the government to provide a report in this manner. So I think it's a very clear verdict given by the World Court based on international law, based on a clear interpretation of Geneva of the Genocide Convention, and identifying very clearly that how the facts on the ground are matching the wrongful acts identified as acts of genocide. So I think this is a very big setback to the Israeli position, and it is also an occasion where the credibility of international institutions has been restored by the ICJ's provisional measures. So I believe this is a very important development in the context of international
Indeed.
law for the
Indeed. Soofi Saab, great to hear from you after a long time. Let me ask you a question as well. Let us talk about the consequences. At this moment, we know that there are provisional measures which have been recommended, and there are demands as well. Now, the question is, what happens if Israel does not comply with these demands? Secondly, also, I wanted to know if tomorrow, day after tomorrow, whenever the final judgment arrives and it is found that Israel has indulged in genocide, what are the consequences then for Israeli state?
Well, the consequences are that once this finding comes to the fight to get to that finding, there will be a long exercise. I think it will take about a year or so before the final judgment comes. And that is one reason why the court has also directed that the evidence relating to genocide needs to be preserved as well. So they have issued the specific instructions to preserve genocide, preserve the evidence of genocide. Now, regarding your question, if whether Israel is prepared to accept this verdict and based on that curtail its military operations, I think we'll have to wait for 2-3 more days to see how Israel reacts, and more important, how does the U.S. government react. I believe that given this exercise of jurisdiction by the ICJ, which is a compulsory jurisdiction, now things might be different. The U.S. government and the Israeli government will have to weigh very seriously the consequences for non-compliance. If you remember, there was a wall case some years ago where ICJ declared that construction of a wall is violation of principles of occupying power. But that was an advisory opinion. Another matter which is pending in respect of Israel is also in the nature of an advisory opinion. This is not an advisory opinion provision measure. This is a compulsory jurisdiction case, and therefore these provision measures are binding under ICJ statute as well as under the UN Charter. Normally, it's very difficult for a country to avoid a compulsory jurisdiction-based provisional measures. The only possibility that a country retains is not to appear in the ICJ and then has some pretext, that too political pretext, to argue that we are not bound by that. Something like which America did in 1986 in Nicaragua case initially. But that's an odd exception. In this case, Israel lawyers participated. They participated in the entire proceedings. They presented their resistance. They presented their objections, and they got overruled. So I believe this verdict is going to be different, and its assessment for the policymakers in Israeli policy circles as well as in the U.S. policy circles will be much more different.
Soofi Saab, obviously, if, we are waiting for the detailed judgment, and of course, you have mentioned here that it might take almost a year to decide whether genocide was conducted by Israel or not. Once it is decided that Israel had actually conducted genocide in Gaza, can we expect that the countries who were facilitating and associating themselves with Israel during this time, what about them? Would they be, in the later phases, would they be asked to, of course, give their position as well in this context? And what about them? Would they be getting any penalties from ICJ?
Well, we call that, let's assume that the genocide is established by the ICJ 1 year from now or 2 years from now. Now, once the declaration arrives, then the step 2 would be that who is responsible for that? Is the government in its entirety is responsible? Then the principles of state responsibility will take over how this proposition will be addressed and dictated. As per the principles of state responsibility, the court may, or some judges may, decide to figure out whether it was a state policy to undertake genocide, or was it individual decision or few individuals. And in such cases, it will make possibly a determination of an individual criminal responsibility. Or if the evidence comes to fore that some military commanders on their own decided to do what they did, notwithstanding what the political rhetoric was, then of course the finding could be different. So it now depends how it eventually, based on the material that is brought to the notice of the court, when the parties submit their detailed pleadings, they have to submit their detailed annexures and exhibits. Based on that, how will they eventually come to a point of individual state responsibility or state responsibility as a whole? And then the consequences will accordingly flow from there.
Right, absolutely. Ahmer Saab, please stay with us and I'll come back to you with more questions. But Ambassador Jamil Saab, there is of course the aspect of the entrenched impunity with regards to Israel, and especially with reference to what is going on in terms of not just since October 7th, but before that as well. Do you think that the case, the ruling that we have seen so far coming in from the ICJ actually steals away this impression from Israel and the international community that Israel is above the law?
There are two aspects of it. One is the political, the second is the diplomatic, and the third one is the legal diplomatic aspect of it. So legal diplomatic aspect, you saw that the ICJ ruling and the basis of the ICJ ruling. And by the way, once we get the final order of the court, final ruling of the court, they have already indicated and they have relied on their interim ruling on the basis of, among many, but more importantly, chiefly on the basis of the Prime Minister's statement, Netanyahu's statement, the President's statement, and also the Minister of Defense statement. And they have correlated it with the ground actions which the military has been taking. So let's see what would be the final, but whatever is the final ruling, and it is compulsory, it's binding, and it's going to be binding. But my point, and this is what I was trying to describe in the previous segment also, that what are the mechanisms to implement it? What are the mechanisms and what are the tools with ICJ to really implement its ruling? So what is written in their statutes book and the implementation part of it in various segments of the literature available on this is that they have to rely on the member states, number one, and rely in what sense? Of course, a diplomatic and political moral strength. But more importantly, if nothing is being implemented, then it's the only forum available to implement is Security Council. And only Security Council has the authority. And the Security Council then goes into Chapter 6, which has about steps to follow, and then Chapter 7, final steps. But again, there are countries, they veto that. Basically, if we talk about and Mr. Soofi is in a better position, but a little knowledge which I have about international law is the Chapter 6 of Article 34. Even Security Council could not investigate what is in the interest of the international peace, which is the embedded responsibility in the Charter of the United Nations that they should ensure, and the two parties having any dispute in the resolution of those two parties, they did not do that. They did not. The Security Council did not implement its own resolutions by invoking Chapter 7. And Chapter 7, Article 42, is very clear. You know, if the party, which is in this case Israel, if they don't really cede to the ruling or judgment, then there are mechanism under Article 42, Chapter 7, that the air, sea, land, blockade, and that's how the relevant, the concerned party, concerned state, in this case Israel, could be forced to really follow.
Dr. Jamil,
On the horizon, that is going to take place. Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Jamil, obviously we know that Nelson Mandela once said that remember that hope is a powerful weapon even when all else is lost. What we saw in recent times is that the countries who always used to hail and propagate the human rights and why they are important throughout the world, I mean, we did not see humanity coming from them in the context of Palestine, for people of Gaza, and inhumanity. In the midst of inhumanity, we saw humanity, oozing out from Nelson Mandela's South Africa. We saw hope oozing out from Nelson Mandela's South Africa. How would you, class their act in this whole conflict, South Africa's role in this conflict?
Well, South Africa role, at least they have been able to shake the conscience of the world community and all the members of the United Nations who had already endorsed all what is going on in Gaza. And if we see the resolution of the General Assembly, where 153 members had passed that resolution, and only 10 members they objected to, including United States and Australia, the UK, and some of the other countries, and the rest of them abstained from it. So that was enough testimony of the world sentiments. But again, what the hopes, as you very correctly quoted Nelson Mandela, the hope, of course, we cannot lose the hopes. Any war for that matter, in the history of humanity, it has to really finally end through the negotiation, and it has to settle down. But in this case, in a very short span of time, the kind of humanity, the kind of atrocities which the world has witnessed in such a short span of time, women, children, hospitals, while the judgment was delivered, while the ruling was delivered, and and afterward, the two remaining hospitals which are operational, one of them was being bombarded and surrounded while the ruling was being read. And after that, also, the Israeli military were issuing warnings for the evacuation from north to south. 1.7 million people displaced, which is court has recognized that, and they have cited it in their ruling, and they have cited it as one of the evidence. So there is sufficient grounds, not only for about this ICJ ruling, but there are sufficient grounds even previously past Security Council resolutions. So Israel is not really acceding to it. So basically, what is the concern of the United Nations members, and why the Charter of United Nations was written and invoked, was to maintain the national peace. We've been discussing on these shows, various platforms, that it has all the potentials of the spreading and the upscaling the international peace by the war being expanded and going to the others, which has already been seen, like what happened in Syria and what has happened in Iraq by firing of rockets, and then again bombardment by the U.S. War machinery. So all these things have the indication of its potential to take the world into the turmoil of the international peace. So and that's why, as I said, the UN Charter was framed, but it's not really happening. What is that stage? Again, I would say that yes, we should not lose hope. If we lose hope, then this UN Charter is scrapped. Then there is no point in having this UN as a world institution, as a world organization. So the hopes are definitely there. UN has done some good job, but again, it gets politicized once it comes to the Security Council and its resolution. And as we have
Right,
seen,
absolutely. And
that the big
I'm
power.
glad, Dr. Jamil, you're pointing out the UNSC, because I want to explore that further, especially in terms of the US's involvement in that. And you earlier mentioned its power to veto as well. And so if this is again brought up in the UNSC, and this is something that is discussed in light of the ICJ's interim ruling, do you think that there will be more pressure on the US in terms of what it's going to decide and what actions it's going to take, especially in its support of Israel, whether or not the power to veto would be difficult now, given the fact that there will be accountability both at home and abroad?
In fact, if the member countries, if they bring the resolution at this stage and before the US election, there are chances that the United States would find it very difficult really to again, time and again, go for the veto. Reasons are that the presidential candidate and the current president of the United States, Joe Biden, has already lost his popularity, and it has come down even below 40%. So their own Democrats, they are really quite worried about it. And that is one part. And second part is the youngsters in these countries, chiefly United States, they are really taking out demonstrations. We have seen huge demonstrations and the voices against the atrocities and against the Israel's action in Gaza. So yes, the answer to your question is that it seems that it would really have some effect and impact. If nothing else, at least they may not veto the U.S. and its allies may not veto the forthcoming resolution, which I feel that after this ruling, some of the countries, perhaps OIC, because they had moved one of the resolutions in which 121 countries had supported it, and later on the other resolution was moved by Egypt and few more countries, about 100 more countries, and that was supported by 150. And those countries are there among the 15 members, less the veto power members, China, Russia exception. The other members are going to support it. So the China, Russia, of course, is likely to support it, but the other members now, such as the veto powers like UK, US, they have to think twice now after this ruling that if they veto, what is going to be the repercussion in their own country, and the political repercussion and the diplomatic repercussion around the world among the member states. So my analysis and imagination is that this time it's going to be harder than what it was last time once, 3 or 4 times. The resolutions for the pause in Gaza was really vetoed. Yes.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Jamil, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. And of course, a lot will be seen in the coming days as to what really happens of the interim ruling by the ICJ. But of course, the decision with regards to provisional measures are welcome, and we hope that they help to end the suffering of the people of Gaza. We're now going to be taking a look at our next segment in terms of what is going on in the political arena in Pakistan in light of the upcoming elections. There is just a couple of days that are left to the elections, and we, of course, are seeing different political parties employ their own strategies. And so the major political parties, of course, in terms of their participation, are being highlighted as to what really is going to be happening in the context of the elections. There is, of course, the PTI, which has had some sort of relief given the fact that the Supreme Court has granted permission to 5 of its candidates to contest the elections. There's also, of course, a PPP that's vying for the votes of the PTI independent candidates, and the PMLN, of course, is putting forward its own strategy, the manifesto of which is expected tomorrow. Farrukh, given, of course, that these parties are, of course, something that the public eye is on, what do you make in terms of what has happened, especially with regards to the way that we have seen a sort of new direction being taken with the PPP and the PTI, and the PPP also claiming that this can be a way forward to stop the PMLN, pointing towards the direction that both the parties might unite against the other. Is that a possibility that you see?
Right. I think that the answer to this question was given by the founder of PTI, who shot down the idea, and I think that that is not going to happen. Of course, People's Party can poach various candidates, as you mentioned in the introduction. That is something that can happen. But apart from that, I don't think that there is much space for that. Of course, when people are running as independents, they can be poached later on as well. So we still have to wait and see. regarding the relief given to PTI, I think that one thing is for sure, as long as the system is working, no matter how much you try to be a victim or you keep on scandalizing various judgments or opinions, but in the end, you find some ways to get relief, and that is good news. I think that PTI should be happy that 5 of its candidates are getting this relief.
Right. And Faisal, what do you think of the SC judgment in light of what PTI has earlier claimed in terms of the SC being partial towards one party or the other, or targeting the PTI in its level playing field in the context of the elections? And we have seen that the hearing and the justices involved have talked about inclusivity and not exclusivity, and have said that elections are meant to be for all and should be open for everyone who's contesting if there is no valid reason.
Yeah, so now obviously if we see it through the lens of PTI, of course right now their symbol is not allowed, and the candidates that are contesting elections, they were already the independent candidates and they have the symbols, various symbols allotted to them, maybe more than 40 symbols they have. So amidst all of this, one thing is for sure, that whoever from the PTI you talk to after this decision, they say it's a good decision, but of course a decision delayed one is considered as justice delayed is justice denied. But still I believe that it is a sort of breather for them, and the candidates which we are obviously talking about, the ones who got relief, they are sort of candidates that can be considered as favorites in their constituencies. And there was all along there was talk about them that they should be contesting election, and that election would of course turn out to be good for that independent candidate, and ultimately that independent candidate is associated with the PTI as a political party. So I think it's a win-win situation for them. And when it comes to a level playing field, of course there are certain angles from which PTI can maintain that they are not getting the level playing field, but at the same time these kind of decisions, they should be looked into as well, that they are actually in their favor. And on ground the situation is being looked after by ECP as well. I mean, but today one of the news I was going through, that one of the ROs who was actually present at one of the PMLN's jalsas, he was actually obviously changed from there and from his position, and he's not RO anymore of this election at least. So to me, I think all of the decisions which are being made, they portray level playing field, and this talk of the town that the level playing field is not being provided with, I think this should be put to an end now. Everyone should be eyeing upon the election. Very soon there's election, and there is no time for these kind of talks now. Must head towards the election.
Right, but my question was with regards to the credibility of the cause that the PTI earlier had questioned in the ruling, especially with regards to their electoral symbol, claiming that that they are targeting a certain political party. And now if the decision is in their favor, does that take away from their earlier claims?
Of course it does. Of course it does. They have been obviously claiming not only this claim, but there are several claims which were made by PTI in past, and now one by one, of course, all of their claims, they are being turning out to be wrong. And that is why I'm further highlighting that the issues which were highlighted by PTI time and again, they are being addressed to, and we can only hope that they can come to terms with it, that whatever the sort of blocking their symbol is not present in, whatever happened to them, it was only because of their own mishaps. And mishaps I'm talking about is the intra-party elections. They did not conduct it rightly, and that is why they got that at the end, and the symbol was obviously removed from their ballot papers. And now we can say that there is a reason behind every reason which is being brought by PTI.
Right, and Farrukh, Faisal said that these are important candidates, and of course they also include Pervez Elahi, but of course at the same time the major blow still exists with regards to the absence of the electoral symbol. And while this may be some sort of relief, is it significant in terms enough of them contesting elections and successfully so?
I think that so far we have heard two narratives. One, PTIs that keeps on exaggerating the negative effect of this, and then another narrative from parties that might be able to or might hope to actually trounce PTI in the elections. So those who are actually celebrating and those who are actually raising hue and cry both underestimate the power of the electorate to find their candidate and vote for them. I think that political parties usually have very effective mechanism to communicate. All these fake websites, all these disinfo campaigns, they will be lost somewhere if the voter wants to vote for the party that they have chosen. But apart from that, we still have to wait and see how things actually mature.
Right, and an important aspect was raised by Farrukh, Faisal, the aspect of fake news, and of course we earlier also saw that there was a website also that coming, especially with regards to PTI candidates, and there are other aspects of the election in itself as well, which point towards misinformation that of course is going to then create problems for the voters. And while it's extremely important for the voters to get access to information, what can parties do or what can the ECP do with regards to curb any such activities?
You know, Sada, obviously, if we look at the activism, the cyber activism of PTI users or PTI voters at this hour or their workers, it is marvelous to see that today I was going through, there are different channels. I mean, there is insaf.pk, and then there is PTI candidates, and then of course few of the other websites which were generated just to obviously give the wrong candidates and their wrong symbols.
And that's only regarding PTI candidates?
That is only regarding PTI candidates, and obviously about symbols, others are very clear that there is only one single symbol for their party, and it's all good for them. But when it comes to PTI, of course there is too much confusion. You remember when when it initially happened, I did say at that time it would be absolutely too much of a hassle for the voters to find out who's actually contesting from the PTI trusted panels and who's not, and they will be confused about symbols till the last day. And yes, they will be confused. But when it comes to the whole exercise, which
how will they be confused?
They will be confused
if a party actually puts out a missive which says that this is a candidate, and then that candidate appears in front of your door and talks to you before election and tells you about the symbol. Why would you actually be confused on the election?
Farrukh, right now in different constituencies,
let me ask you another follow-up question as well.
Yeah.
How many elections have you covered?
I have covered 2013, 18, and this is the third one. Before that, obviously, for the studies, I was not in the country.
I've been following elections since 1985 when I was a kid, right? My humble
Farrukh,
summation is people have very effective methods to communicate.
They have, Farrukh, but why I'm saying this, because even today I was going through different examples in which the multiple independent candidates from the same constituency, they were having the PTI flag behind them, Imran Khan's picture behind them, and they were claiming that they are the right people and you have to stamp on our symbol, not anyone else's.
Who is the party secretary general right now?
Obviously,
Umar
Ayub.
Okay, Umar Ayub will put out a letter in which he will nominate all the candidates, and then all you have to do is follow those candidates.
And follow those candidates, and them letters can be made fake as well, Farrukh. They can be.
There is only one website. There is only one Twitter handle of the main organization, and it is verified. So why would that be such a doom and gloom?
In the age of screenshots, Farrukh, in the age of screenshots, when you can even make a screenshot of a fake
the question is
conversation,
whether or not
WhatsApp
people will actually do that verification. try to figure
that
out
is the
what is
biggest
the official
question.
account.
And especially for them people in the rural areas who simply believe others and the informations of others. It's all up to who's giving them information that particular day and what they're going to do.
This is the problem with people who follow elections on the television, right? Don't mind.
No.
Hang on.
Farrukh,
allow
in
me
2013,
allow me
I
to
have
qualify
followed,
what I'm saying. Allow me to
I
just
have
qualify.
been actually working for, at that time, both of the elections.
you must
I've
have.
been employed with the news agency, international news agencies, and I have gone to all of the places, and I know
I'm
how
just
it,
qualifying one thing. When you actually go to a constituency, constituencies don't just appear on the election day and then disappear. This canvassing goes on for days and days.
It does.
And there are candidates that Baradari knows, people know, and everybody know by the election date. If you are thinking that somebody is going to be confused in the polling booth, I assure you that there is enough training that goes on before the election date that ensures that you get to your candidate.
It does happen, but in this context, Farrukh, even today I was going through one of the videos of Salman Akram Raja. He's been saying that this man does not belong to me because he's having my picture as well. And obviously that candidate, he's actually contesting on the PP seat, and obviously on top it's NA. So he's having even the picture of Salman Akram Raja as well with him to assure people that he's the right candidate. Whereas Salman Akram Raja himself is saying that he's not the right candidate.
O ye of such little faith.
Well, we of course hope that that is not the situation and that people are able to vote for whoever that they actually want to vote for, and that is of course what we want to see in the elections, that the voters are able to make their choices. But that's all that we have from the debate today. Thank you, Farrukh. Thank you, Faisal, for joining us, and we'll now see you Monday.